The Earth is not like other planets. The surface of the Moon has remained unchanged for over 3 billion years, its dust disturbed only by the footprints of man and the occasional meteorite. But the face of the Earth is changing constantly. Over millions of years, the forces deep within it can heave entire mountain ranges to the surface, or in an instant, they can reduce the work of man to ruins. The outer skin of the Earth is fragile. Compared to the huge mass within it, the surface that we live on is eggshell thin. If we ignore the workings of the Earth beneath our feet, we do so at our peril. For deep inside, under immense pressure, the Earth is in constant motion. Not solid rock, but molten minerals and metals with temperatures of over 5,000 degrees centigrade. Driven by these hot and turbulent forces, the surface of our globe is shattered, like an eggshell, into a dozen massive fragments, each one supporting entire land masses and oceans. These tectonic plates, up to 40 miles thick, snag against each other like an ill-fitting jigsaw puzzle. When the fault lines between them give way, the result is an earthquake. This is one such fault line. The San Andreas Fault rips through the heart of California for almost 700 miles. Like a broken zip, it stitches together one slab of the Earth's crust, the North American plate, to its neighbor, the Pacific plate. But the two are moving in different directions. In California, illusion is an everyday reality. Each year, over 20,000 tremors are recorded here, but ignoring them is an art form. There are major fault zones under both Los Angeles and San Francisco. 30 million people live there. And yet, for most of them, the big one might just as well mean the next wave.
Looking at traffic over in the East Bay right now, coming down westbound 80 from the Hilltop area, down past El Portal.
October the 17th, 1989, was a beautiful day in San Francisco, and a clear one. The evening rush hour was light. Most people were staying close to a TV to watch the World Series baseball game between San Francisco and Oakland. The concerns of the 3 million souls living around the Bay were everyday ones. And yet, this was not just any day. In the next few seconds, a small event in the Earth's long timescale would unleash destruction that would affect every one of them and take away more than 40 lives. The trigger that would unleash the Earth's energy in the direction of San Francisco lay hidden a full 60 miles down the coast. More than 10 miles deep within the Earth, below a mountain called Loma Prieta, a 30-mile chunk of the San Andreas Fault was about to lurch just 6 feet northwards.
I remember 3 loud, smashing booms and bang, bang, bang. Each one louder than the one before, each one more violent. And at that time, Susan came tearing by me from the back of the house yelling, "Earthquake, get out!" And I looked over my shoulder, and the house moved. It moved and moved away and then just sank out of sight.
The house is going down the hillside, and he's hanging on to me. That he even got out in the nick of time is a miracle. It seemed like forever. The trees kept falling, but there's nothing we can do. There's nothing to do.
The time was 4 minutes past 5. In Candlestick Park, home to the San Francisco Giants, 60,000 baseball fans were packed into the stands.
There was a lot of nervous anticipation for the game to start. And the players came out to toss the baseball back and forth. Pitchers were warming up.
Bottom of the fourth inning, Dave Parker barely, by inches, just misses a home run.
And I started hearing a stamping of feet. It sounded like feet stomping up and down on these metal sections.
I looked up in the sky because I heard a very loud noise. And I go, what is that? I said, that's not an airplane because there was nothing in the sky. Well, it was the earthquake. It was the rumble. And then we felt like there was a tremendous wave underneath our feet.
Take it. Tell you what, we're having an earthquake.
It happened so fast, and it felt to me on the field like there was a 600-pound gopher going 45 miles an hour right underneath my feet. And when it happened, I braced myself this way. I went down to get my balance.
I don't know if we're on the air or not, and I'm not sure I see her. At the moment, though, we are.
It also seemed to move through like a freight train, and I would hear it coming towards us and then going away from us. And it seemed to be these waves coming through and hitting the stadium at different frequencies.
I then looked up and I saw this light tower here, right behind third base, and it was torquing this way.
As soon as the earthquake stopped, there was this odd silence. You couldn't hear anything. And then all of a sudden this roar came out from the entire stadium. It was a celebration.
They cheered because here we are in California, we're at the World Series, and we survived an earthquake. And they're going, okay, let's get on with the game.
But there would be no game that night. In the 15 seconds that Candlestick Park swayed and groaned, the rest of the Bay Area had been brought to its knees.
911 San Francisco emergency.
911 San Francisco emergency. 911 San Francisco emergency.
At police headquarters, the switchboard operators found the emergency had come to them.
Oh, shit. Oh, my God, we're having an earthquake. Wait a minute. Hold on.
It was just utter chaos, confusion, people screaming. I remember I was grabbing onto the channel trying to keep still, and I kept rolling away.
No part of downtown escaped the quake. Hardest hit was the fashionable Marina district on the waterfront. The shock wave caused its underlying soil to compact by up to 5 inches, fracturing gas and water mains. Fires spread freely, and there was no way to put them out. High above San Francisco Bay, radio reporter Stan Burford was trying to make sense of the traffic chaos below. When he found the cause, he couldn't believe his eyes.
I looked at the Bay Bridge, the structure that you expect to be there forever, and it was broken. And I was trying to explain this to my production booth, and I couldn't get their attention. And finally, I just screamed into the radio. I said, Franco, listen to me. I'll say this slowly, I'll say it once. The upper deck has fallen onto the lower deck.
As more traffic headed onto the bridge, few could guess the reason for the holdup. Some abandoned their cars. Others, in confusion, were diverted from the lower deck to the upper one.
All the traffic, 5 lanes wide, 5 miles long, came to a halt up on the Bay Bridge. None of us knew what was going on. And after a time, someone began to organize the cars to get off of the bridge one by one. So we began to head eastbound. And as we drove along, the little orange car pulled out, passed us, got back in front, and that's when it all went wrong.
They sent us down here, surprisingly, in the wrong direction. There's another car. Gosh!
And then comes the sound of the car hitting the far side of the bridge that had fallen down. The car on the other side looked to be extremely precarious, in that only its first two wheels were clinging to a crack and it was leaking gasoline. And you could tell, even from our vantage point, that the driver was in serious trouble. Plus, we knew that the passenger was alive because he was able to yell out.
Lesesita Halangahu was the passenger, just arrived from Tonga. His sister had been driving him home. Now she was dead.
I saw the broken section, and the last thing I remember, I said, oh my God. When I woke up, I saw my sister was lying beside my arm, and she was bleeding. And I tried to help her, but I can't do nothing.
And high above the earth, Stan Burford was equally helpless. In a few seconds, he'd moved from routine traffic reports to being the passive witness of massive and unfathomable destruction.
I looked out the window, and as I looked further ahead into Oakland, there was an enormous plume of what I thought to be smoke coming up in the area of the Cypress Freeway. I literally could not believe what I was seeing. A double-decker freeway had collapsed, the upper portion falling onto the lower portion. An amazing sight, a frightening sight, a very sobering sight.
Just seconds before, Dorothy Otto had been putting the day's work behind her as she drove onto the freeway.
Well, I was on my way home, and I was listening to National Public Radio. They announced that we're having an earthquake. They said, oh my God, it's a big one, and the road shifted about 8 feet left to right. And the cars in front of me, they were kind of like bumping up and down as the road shifted. And then one of the upright beams that was holding the structure up blew away. The cars that I'd been traveling with were gone. And in their place, where I would have been seeing them, I saw a huge wall of concrete. And it was coming up the hood of my car. And it got to where you could see the striations and the pebbles in it. And then I stood on the brakes, and the windshield just went.
A section of raised freeway 1.5 miles long had collapsed. Onlookers said the quake had rolled along its length like an ocean wave. In its wake, cars and trucks were now pancaked to a thickness of just 18 inches. Their drivers still inside them.
It's very overwhelming. I wasn't prepared for it mentally. To smell death. I mean, there were some fires that were beginning to burn. You're smelling that. You know people are trapped. You can hear the noises. You can hear an eerie sounds. You wonder if that's not a human moan, or is that the freeway moaning or groaning? Is that the car? Is that just rubber and plastic I'm smelling? Or is there some human flesh I'm smelling in there?
There were a lot of people screaming. And I called for help briefly, but there was no one around. I picked a pencil up and I wrote my husband a goodbye note. Jack, the earthquake hit while I was under concrete. Worst happened. It collapsed on car.
I'm alive, just my left foot stuck under the car. Hope they don't kill me getting me out. Love you lots. Good luck to us both. And then 2 kiss marks. I was gonna write, you know, it's been a great 20 years, and I thought, oh, this is really depressing. Right as I was writing this, the cars in front of me caught on fire. And I was sitting in gasoline and oil, and the smells were terrible. And I screamed so loud, they thought there were 2 people in the car.
There was a fire somewhere, and I could hear a person. I went over to take a peek and to see what her situation was. And looking at it initially, she looked like she would be easy to rescue. Her foot was trapped in some of her ankle. So I figured, this is easy, we can do this.
As the San Andreas fault settled uneasily into its new position, there came a series of aftershocks. Dorothy's space, already tight, was getting tighter still.
There was an 18-inch opening. That's how they crawled in. They had to take their hats and coats off, actually, to get in. And there was a big aftershock where the opening went down to 9 inches. It threw concrete on them. It terrified all of us, and they started to leave. They didn't say anything, but I could feel them leaving, if you know what I mean. And I said, guys, please don't leave me and her to die alone.
Dorothy kind of grabbed towards my hand and screamed out as we were going away. So I turned around and went back to continue the task.
As the road shifted, the roof of the car kept coming down further and further, and the area kept getting smaller and smaller. So I laid across the armrest of the car, and then as aftershocks happened, I would just lay further and further over. And imagine having your leg caught like an animal in a trap, and having the cars in front of you on fire. It is absolutely horrifying. They really thought that I was going to die in there, and they thought they were going to die in there as well.
Dorothy is a very talkative person, and when we came back, she was rattling off a mile a minute. So I told Dorothy, and I told her very firmly, that she was to bite down on this piece of rag. Every time that she felt pain, or every time she wanted to talk to me, she better bite down on this rag, because if she didn't shut up, I was going to leave her here to die.
And the deal was that I had a rag in my mouth. I would scream the opposite direction, so I wouldn't be screaming at them, because if I screamed at them, it just bounced off the concrete and it drove them nuts. So, I mean, they were, you know, trying to think through how to get me out of there.
When Dorothy saw we were unable to free her, and it was just her foot keeping her under all this concrete, she was very explicit about us cutting it off. I think she might have mentioned even taking an axe and just cutting it off.
Yeah, I think we're clear on the upper deck. All the damage is going to be in between decks.
Block 1 disregards a response to Vernon.
With 200 tons of concrete, there was nothing they could do to move the concrete. So they sent for a surgeon to take my leg off.
Disregards a response to Vernon.
And the surgeon came in and he was ready. He was there, he looked at the situation, he wanted in, he wanted out. And Dorothy was like, sure, just take it off, let's go.
We need the jaws of life.
But in the choking dust and petrol fumes, in that hot and confined space, someone was prepared to try one last time.
One of the firefighters had a really bright idea about how to take the jaws of life apart and just use the pin, the leverage pin, to try to move the dashboard of my car. And it worked, and they just popped me out. I mean, I was out of the car onto the concrete in no time. It was quite a exit.
In the spasm of an earthquake, the difference between life and death is a hair's breadth. Dorothy Otto survived. Most driving home alongside her that night did not.
There were many people that died. I think there were 42 in there that died. And you do wonder, you know, why you were saved. And it really messes with your head. It takes away your invincibility. And I talked about it a lot. My husband came into the hospital the next day and he said, okay, talk about it now, because if you don't, it'll become a hard knot that'll never come out. So, uh-oh.
The earthquake of 1989 was not San Francisco's first, and won't be its last. Successive generations have chosen to live there, knowing the risk, but gambling that the quake wouldn't happen in their lifetime. In 1906, it was no different. San Francisco was an expanding boomtown until the San Andreas Fault shifted. More than 3,000 people were killed in the quake and the fires that followed. But there was a pattern to the catastrophe. The buildings that suffered the most severe damage had been built on unstable land, where landfill had been dumped in the bay. This poor soil made a startling difference to the intensity of the earth tremor.
1906 was a real earthquake. When the ground shakes in an earthquake, how much motion you really get at the surface depends a lot on the rock. Like where you're standing on really good hard rock, like we here are in the Marin Headlands, the motions can be very violent, but they're relatively short, they're relatively small and abrupt, and they get it over with. But when you're sitting on soft ground, like you are around the edge of the bay, the motion goes on for a long time. It gets trapped in the sediments, so you'll have a lot of trapped energy reverberating, almost like echoes within the soft sediments. And then if you have soft sediments of a certain kind, made of sand, you shake them hard enough, long enough, they lose their strength altogether and they flow like water.
It's a phenomenon they call liquefaction. When the soil is weak and low-lying, the pressures of an earthquake can turn solid ground to liquid. The shock waves shake apart loose sediment and replace it with rising water. But human memory is short. In spite of the known risks, the Cyprus Freeway was also built on sediment which liquefied during the 1989 quake. And ironically, the stricken Marina district had been built on landfill from 1906. Earthquake debris plowed into the bay by the quake survivors. The foundations that should have supported the Marina's buildings were swallowed up by an 80-year-old ghost. Mankind flatters itself that it has the earth at its command. But nothing is immune to the forces of nature, neither nations, armies, nor governments. The convulsions deep beneath the earth of Central America punch through the skin of Mexico. 3 tectonic plates rub shoulders beneath the country, and its volcanic landscape is testimony to the volatility of the earth below. This is one of the most earthquake-prone regions on the planet. The heart of present-day Mexico City sits on the site of the ancient Aztec capital, Tenochtitlan. It lay on an island in a great lake. The Aztecs left no record of any catastrophe by earthquake. When Tenochtitlan did fall, it was not to the ravages of the earth, but to the Spanish conquistadors.
Of course, we are on the lake bed right here, but when the Spanish came, they had no use for Mexico City as an island, and they just decided to drain the swampy areas, to drain the lake, and basically that's what they did.
And on the drained lake bed, the Spanish built a great city of stone, in the image of the ones they'd left behind in the Old World. When earthquakes shook them down, they simply rebuilt even more grandly. Today, glass and concrete have taken the place of stone, and the buildings are over 20 stories high.
The kind of problem that we have now really started when the first high-rise building was built, and right away it was damaged by an earthquake. It wasn't even inhabited. Unfortunately, the high-rise buildings, which were so successfully built in New York, because New York has a very hard ground, here it didn't work out so well because of the soft ground. People said, well, these buildings are earthquake-proof, but I suppose they were not earthquake-proof enough.
"7:18 in the morning, September the 19th, 1985. Mexico City is about to be put to the test. With a population of 20 million, it's the world's largest city. Its apartment blocks and high rises sit on the dried-up lake bed like peas on the skin of a drum. And 200 miles away, a giant slab of the Earth's crust is giving way. The shock wave that hit Mexico City rolled in at over 15,000 miles an hour. As it hit the old lake bed, its vibrations intensified sixfold. Nearly 400 buildings were toppled. Ciela Marquez was lucky. She had just left her apartment for work.
Our apartment block had twisted round and was leaning to one side. The upper floors were squashed together like a sandwich. You could smell gas, hear screams. There were clouds of dust. It was truly awful. There was blood dripping down from the top of the building, from dead people who'd been crushed, and from others who, when they heard the quake, had run to the windows. They'd been cut and were trapped.
High-rise apartments had swayed in time to the earthquake's vibration, crushing the people inside. As Alejandro Villamar scrambled through the rubble, he heard a young girl.
We discovered where the girl was because she was crying. We got down to her through a hole. And we realized there was also a woman there. When we touched her, we found she wasn't breathing. She was dead. But she was holding the little girl tight in her arms, still protecting her. The only way to save the life of the girl was to cut off the arms of the mother. That was awful. To lie face down, cutting the arms off a human body. I had to keep thinking, she's dead, she's dead. I was really affected, totally destroyed. All day long I couldn't cry, but when night came, then I cried.
At least 18,000 people died in Mexico City. The precise total will never be known. But amidst the horror, there were tiny miracles. 3 full days after the earthquake, rescuers were clearing rubble at the General Hospital when one of them heard something quite incredible.
At
3 in the morning, one of the people clearing rubble told us he could hear the crying of a baby. Obviously, nobody believed him because it was impossible. We'd seen how many people had died. But this man was so insistent that we finally went over to where he was, and he was right. There was a baby crying down there. When I started to tunnel through the rubble, I could see the bars of a cradle and a newborn baby's hand, a fist. After 5 days working under the ruins, that baby boy was the first we were able to save.
In all, 58 newborn babies were found still alive beneath the ruins of Mexico's hospitals. Some had been buried in darkness for up to 7 days. Doctors think they survived the experience because their bodies behaved as though they were still in the womb. They were greeted as the miracle babies. But miracles were few. The tragedy was overwhelming. The mood was somber. The earthquake shook Mexico's political structures from top to bottom. All the toppled buildings had conformed to the government construction codes of the time. They included schools, hospitals, and apartment blocks, all supposed to be earthquake-proof. The blame was put on corruption and poor workmanship.
The damage was just horrible. This is the sort of thing that should not have happened and that should never happen again. Actually, no one should die in an earthquake. The point is that people are not killed by earthquakes, but by buildings. According to the code, none of them should have collapsed.
It is a human failing to deal with tragedy by apportioning blame. But earthquakes raise a more pressing question about the way we take for granted the solid earth beneath our feet. The lesson from Mexico City is that it is not so straightforward. In an earthquake, seismic waves commonly travel at speeds of up to 13,000 miles an hour, so fast as to be invisible. But in Mexico and elsewhere, eyewitnesses have recorded a quite different phenomenon.
People would see so-called visible waves. They look like water waves. Same velocity, the same wavelength. This is something that we see in every earthquake on soft ground, in every earthquake on soil. People see this, and I'm sure that millions of people have seen them. Yet many of my colleagues tend to disbelieve the phenomenon.
If earthquakes can make solid ground behave like water, Sinner Lomnitz draws a logical conclusion.
The problem with some of the buildings was that it simply capsized. It just turned over. It's my impression that the more the building looks like a ship, the better it's going to behave in this sort of environment. It should be reasonably low slung with a low center of gravity. And there is a good reason why ocean liners are not built 18 or 20 stories high.
But on an increasingly crowded planet, such thinking demands a leap of imagination that few are ready to make. Humanity's gamble against the forces of nature continues. No one likes bad news. By most estimates, the big one is already overdue on America's west coast. A mega quake 30 times stronger than the San Francisco quake of 1989. And yet, California appears to be a society in denial. For those whose business is preparing for disaster, it's hard to turn the tide.
One problem that we do have in the Los Angeles area is that we've been through mudslides, fires, earthquakes, riots, and people are just kind of disastered out.
In the face of chronic earthquake apathy, David Heinzman's job is to sell ways of holding a home together during the fiercest of tremors.
Welcome to the Seismic Palace. We've designed this 10-foot by 5-foot structure to simulate earthquakes and the effectiveness of our securing systems.
In David Heinzman's sales pitch, the unbridled forces of nature are represented by his brother, Ted.
And now a severe earthquake.
There are billions of dollars of real estate in Los Angeles. David and Ted are doing their bit to keep it that way.
Now we've used our quake putty to secure the vase of flowers, and we've secured the computer monitor by using special thumb buckles and a seismic flex bracket on the file cabinet. And now we're going to see how all these installed systems fare up in an earthquake condition.
But a real earthquake can carry away an entire home, contents and all. January the 17th, 1994. The Los Angeles suburb of Northridge is hit by a shock of 6.8 on the Richter scale. Officially, that's a moderate earthquake, but the damage is extraordinary. 11,000 homes destroyed, 250 gas mains broken, and 9 highway overpasses all demolished in 30 seconds. This moderate quake became the most expensive natural disaster in US history. Crucially, the town was directly on the epicenter, above a fault line that no one even knew was there.
The Northridge earthquake was the first earthquake to strike the heart of a metropolitan area in a modern society since 1906. It wasn't supposed to happen there. It occurred on the Northridge Fault, which until that morning was thoroughly unknown to everybody.
The cause was a blind thrust fault, an upward movement of the Earth's crust so strong that the surrounding mountains rose by almost a foot. This was not the big one for California, but it cruelly exposed the failings in structures that had been thought earthquake-proof. There was a clear warning to be had for all cities in earthquake zones, but not everyone seemed to be listening.
The Japanese, in particular, they had a pretty thorough look of what happened, and they drew some rather amazing to us conclusions from some of it. I think from an engineering perspective, many understood that certain new problems had been uncovered, and there should be an appropriate response in Japan. But too often, the response on the Japanese side is, we're different, we're better, this cannot happen. And then Kobe happened. And in fact, it was much, much, much worse.
If the Japanese appeared to be complacent, it was understandable. They have long led the rest of the world in earthquake science, putting their faith in technology to ride out the forces of nature. Japan lies at the junction of 3 major fault lines in the Earth's crust. Its tightly packed population suffers 1,000 earthquakes every year, 10% of the planet's seismic energy. The reason for the Japanese preoccupation with earthquakes is simple. They still carry the memory of the last earthquake tragedy to hit Tokyo. The Great Kanto earthquake of 1923 was a massive 8.3 on the Richter scale. 100,000 people perished. In 1923, Mrs. Mitsuyo Komazawa was a newlywed living in Tokyo. Today, Mrs. Komazawa is 97, but her memories of the Great Kanto earthquake are as painful as ever.
During the earthquake, I was hiding under a desk. It was terribly dangerous, so I wanted to stay there. Then I got trapped under debris, and I couldn't move. A man began to help me by pulling as hard as he could at my neck. And at last I was able to move, and they carried me out of the building. Crossing the iron bridge out of town was quite dangerous. The valley below was deep, and if you fell, there was no way you'd be saved. So I had to cross over the bridge in bare feet. Somehow we got across and carried on. It was late at night before we reached safety. When we saw Mount Fuji, everyone burst into tears.
The evacuees from Tokyo were taken by boat to the port city of Kobe, long thought to be among the safest in Japan from risk of earthquakes. 1995 found Kobe a bustling, confident city, its port one of the busiest in the world. There was no history of seismic activity in recent memory, and 2 decades of research work had identified no serious earthquake risk in the Kobe area. But for the people of Kobe, the unthinkable was about to happen. 1 year to the day after Northridge, their city would be torn apart.
I was at the counter, sorting out a delivery. It began with a vertical tremor. We said, "What's this? An earthquake?" After 5 seconds or so, there came such an awful sideways shake that I could see the ground actually swaying.
Scientists recognize a distinct pattern in earthquakes. Initial upward movement followed by separate horizontal shaking. For the citizens of Kobe, textbook analysis became a serpent-like reality.
I heard this tremendous noise, like a train right behind your ear, and then suddenly the shock came through, and it just came up like that, and the whole path in front of me seemed to rise. And I didn't see it go back down again, because immediately I was hit by the sideways shock, and I was thrown against this wall. And so it became so violent that I had to hang on to the wall and brace myself against it. And as I hung on to the wall, I began to see the wall back there waving.
The quake would prove the most powerful to hit Japan since the Great Kanto earthquake. For Mrs. Komazawa, 70 years on, history was repeating itself.
The tea ceremony to mark the new year was about to take place. We were making our final preparations for it. Then the earthquake came.
The earth leapt up with a sound like doom. The moment it hit us, everything shook so strongly that the shrine I had at home fell off the wall and trapped me. I couldn't move at all. I was just lying there, completely helpless. Then I heard Mrs. Komazawa crawling towards me, moaning, "Oh my God." I was so upset, I couldn't think what to do. I just took Mrs. Komazawa's hand in mine and held it tight.
And just as 70 years before, disaster followed on disaster. Japanese cities have emergency water mains intended to be earthquake-proof. In Kobe, they simply collapsed.
There were burning houses, fire engines, and ambulances with sirens wailing. You could hear people screaming and weeping. I was completely terrified with what I saw. It looked like the aftermath of an air raid in the war. We'd never dreamt that Kobe could be hit by a big earthquake like this. There was no psychological preparation. We didn't know what to do. We just couldn't take in what was happening in front of us.
It was the most costly natural disaster ever. An earthquake that science had deemed impossible. Nature proved otherwise.
Billions of pounds, dollars of property was destroyed in just a few seconds. And of course, there were around 5,000 fatalities in the earthquake. I think the primary reason the Japanese were so surprised as to the extensive amount of damage and life loss was the overconfidence built over the last couple of decades that everything that was being built, and by default everything older, was earthquake resistant.
Like Northridge, this was a hidden fault, not recognized previously. And just as in Mexico City and San Francisco, a major cause of destruction in Kobe was liquefaction. High real estate prices and an expanding population had led to large-scale construction on landfill along the waterfront. The damage to familiar landmarks was spectacular and disorienting.
There were buildings that were at an angle, slightly bent, cracks everywhere. Most of them suffered damage halfway up the building, where the shock appears to have gone up the building, been reflected at the top, come back down, met the second shock coming up, and then the building's cracked in the middle. There was a sort of air of bewilderment about people didn't know what would happen next.
We have a proverb. If a thing happens twice, it will happen again. I've had 2 earthquakes. One more, and that will be the end for me.
The Kobe earthquake was a massive blow to all those who thought that science could second-guess nature. The Earth stirred itself for just 20 seconds, and suddenly all certainty, all sense of order was gone. 5,000 people were killed in Kobe. The sense of shock went far beyond the shores of Japan.
Kobe, to me, is just another warning of what can happen. Kobe was not a large earthquake. We have not had a truly large earthquake, such as a 1906 or a 1923 event in a metropolitan area. So I think we're going to find some unpleasant lessons in a much larger earthquake that we have not yet seen in the smaller earthquakes. That is applicable throughout the world. The typical attitude is, it cannot happen to me. It can happen only to someone else far away. And in fact, a large percentage of the planet is on unstable ground.
Around the world, more than 1.5 million people have died in earthquakes in this century alone. Mankind's instinctive response to tragedy beyond our control is to blot out the memory. It's natural to look only to the future, to want to build again and to give birth to new hopes. But while human memory is short, the Earth's timescale is unimaginably long, and its measured rhythm pays scant regard to the concerns of man. Humankind cannot easily contemplate reality, but the Earth will continue to move and to grow beneath our feet, to bring both life and death to the world. And it will continue to challenge our most deeply held sense of our place within it. Next week on Savage Earth, the world's most dangerous volcanoes. Hypnotic, beautiful, but deadly. To learn more about our Savage Earth, a booklet is available. Send 2 first-class stamps to Savage Earth, P.O. Box 525, Manchester M60 3JF.